Tensions in the Middle East rise, the Pentagon announcing that the U.S. is ramping up its presence in the region after deadly strikes against major leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah. And Biden saying it doesn't help with a possible ceasefire deal in Gaza. Let's bring in former NATO Supreme Allied Commander and retired U.S. Air Force General Philip Breedlove. General, thank you for joining us this morning. Off the top here, what is your assessment of the situation in the Middle East right now, especially with U.S. Assets heading that way?
Well, first of all, Joey, thanks for having me on, and thanks for your service.
Yes, sir, and thank you for yours.
So it's obviously heating up. And what we, I think, always have to remember when we think about this part of the world and what is happening in and around Israel is all roads begin in Iran and all roads end in Iran. This is Iran pushing at Israel in many directions, and now Israel responding. And the world, and especially the United States, are looking to see how they can both diffuse but also protect if Iran does what it did earlier this year when it fired over 300 missiles and rockets at Israel.
You know, I've grown up hearing about Iran doesn't need to get a nuclear weapon, and in the last decade of my adulthood, the diplomacy around that, the Iran nuclear deal and things of that nature. From your assessment, Supreme Allied Commander of NATO forces, you understand the military capabilities of countries around the world. In your assessment, if Iran and Israel are at war, does Israel have the ability to fight that war without U.S. troops involved?
I don't think that U.S. troops are going to be required. U.S. support in the form of naval and air forces might be required, but I find it highly unlikely that soldiers and Marines would be required on the ground.
If we war game that out, the U.S., say maybe the U.S. and U.K. are supporting Israel directly, who comes with Iran? How does this escalate into multi-countries?
Well, clearly Iran has its own group of supporters, and Iran increasingly is growing close to Russia and those others such as China and North Korea who are trying to form an axis of attack towards Western interest and specifically U.S. interests in this world. So I would expect that if this got protracted, Iran would get some support from there. But Joey, let me just say, I really don't think Iran wants to fight Israel, but they know they can't defeat them militarily. I think Iran wants to keep Israel spun up, keep them killing and having a hard time in Gaza, because Iran wants the world to defeat Israel. Iran wants the world to pull back its support and the world to control Israeli actions. And frankly, that's been working pretty good for them.
You know, I asked those questions going into this because a lot of times people don't hear how does this play out? What is the real risk here? If we take a step back, go back to where we are today, we have a president now who's a lame duck president, for whatever that means. We have a vice president and a former president running for president. So three people involved in this in that way, as far as what they say they would do, what they have done, and what they're doing. What is the right policy to stop this war from happening? When President Biden and Kamala Harris say that the war, the potential war, what's happening in Gaza needs to come to a close soon, and then they back that up with telling Benjamin Netanyahu it means he needs to create a ceasefire by stopping his advance. President Trump says something very similar. He says that it needs to stop very soon, but the inference is, through his record, he supports Israel in what they're trying to do. What is the right policy? How do we end this and not lose Israel in the meantime?
Joey, if I could, I want to raise the vision here just a little bit and talk about how we fare in the whole world. I believe that we see deterrence failing. Western deterrence is failing around the world because the world looks at the West's response to its current challenges and sees it lacking, or certainly not as strong as it has been in the past. We're being pressured in the South China Sea. North Korea firing missiles, Iran pressuring all around the waters, those important waters that carry oil. And frankly, Russia is running amok in Europe. Moldova is under gray zone attack. Georgia under fierce gray zone attack. A Ukraine war that is horrific. And I think that what we, in a larger sense to what you asked me, we are losing deterrence around the world. And the West, and I would say the U.S., we have to regain that deterrence.
I agree. I don't know how we do it, honestly, but I understand the necessity of it. General, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again for your service.